All right, so are you ready to dive deep into some seriously intriguing stuff? Because today we're talking about the Divine Council.
Uh, I love this
It's
topic.
super interesting.
It's so
It's
fascinating.
one of those things in the Hebrew Bible where it's like, what is going on?
Right.
It's this assembly of divine beings who basically run the cosmos under Yahweh.
And it's not just the Hebrew Bible, right?
No,
Like
no.
a lot of ancient Mediterranean cultures had similar ideas about councils of gods.
Okay, so this was a common theme. But what makes the Israelite version so unique?
I think that's what makes it so fascinating, right? Is
Yeah.
that there are these parallels, but the Israelite version has its own really unique twists. And I think those parallels to Canaanite religion are some of the most intriguing pieces of this whole puzzle.
Yeah, because it gives us a window into like how the ancient Israelites might have understood their God, like in light of all these other cultures that surrounded them.
Exactly.
So where do we even begin to unpack this?
Well, I think a great place to start are the Ugaritic texts you sent over. They're written in a language very similar to Hebrew, and they give us a glimpse into the Canaanite pantheon.
So it's like we're reading a historical gossip column. We get to eavesdrop on all the stories and the relationships.
Exactly.
Okay, give me the tea, spill the tea.
Well, one of the most striking parallels is the way both the Ugaritic texts and the Hebrew Bible describe these councils.
Okay.
So the Ugaritic texts talk about this assembly of the sons of El.
Okay.
And that sounds very familiar when we think about the sons of God in the Hebrew Bible.
So are we saying that the Israelites just borrowed this idea from the Canaanites wholesale?
Not quite.
Okay.
I mean, yes, there was a shared concept of this divine council,
Okay.
but the Israelites adapted it to fit their own monotheistic beliefs.
Okay. So they took the framework and they made it their own.
Right. It's like taking a recipe and tweaking it.
Yeah.
You know, using the same ingredients, but coming up with your own dish.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this detective work is really going to help us understand how the Bible views God. But remind me, where do we see the sons of God in the Hebrew Bible? Because I feel like I've come across that phrase, but it always seemed kind of mysterious.
Yeah, you find it all over the place.
Okay.
I mean, you see it in Genesis, Job, Deuteronomy, and of course the Psalms. And Psalm 82, for instance, uses almost identical language to the Ugaritic texts when describing the council.
Well, okay, so we're talking about some serious parallels here.
Absolutely.
Okay, but before we get too deep into specifics, I need to just make sure we're all on the same page here.
Sure.
We're not saying that the Bible is promoting polytheism.
No, absolutely not. The Hebrew Bible is very clear about this.
Yes.
Yahweh is the one true God.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure we're all clear on that.
Of course.
All right, so if Yahweh is in charge, then what are all these sons of God actually doing?
Well, think of it this way.
Right.
Like we have this cosmic organizational chart, right?
Right.
At the top, you have Yahweh, the ultimate CEO of creation. And then you have these lesser Elohim, the sons of God, and they kind of act like this board of directors carrying out Yahweh's directives and overseeing different aspects of creation.
So it's like this chain of command
Yeah,
with Yahweh delegating authority down the ranks.
exactly.
Okay, interesting.
Right.
But that makes me wonder how much freedom do these lower-ranking Elohim have?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's one that we see play out in different ways throughout the Bible.
Okay.
For instance, you have 1 Kings 22,
Uh-huh.
where Yahweh has already decided to punish Ahab, but he allows the council to discuss how to best carry out his decree.
Okay, so it's not just like this dictatorship where
Like-
Yahweh snaps his fingers and everything just happens?
It's so much more dynamic than that.
Okay.
It's like a conversation.
Yeah, like a debate almost.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then you have Psalm 82, where Yahweh judges those lesser gods for their corruption.
Whoa, really?
It's like he holds them accountable for their actions.
Okay, so they're not just puppets on a string.
No, not at all.
They have responsibility.
And they face consequences for their choices.
Okay, this is getting more interesting by the minute, but if we're talking about this council meeting, where is all this happening?
Well, both the Ugaritic texts and the Hebrew Bible use really similar imagery.
Okay.
To describe the council's meeting place, we see mountains,
Okay.
we see gardens,
Okay.
even these watery dwellings.
Found these gardens water sounds like an epic setting.
Right.
Okay.
And if you remember the tents or the tabernacles we talked about,
Uh-huh.
they're often used to describe the divine dwelling place in both traditions.
Now that you mention it, I do remember reading about those. It's like those spaces represent a point where like the divine and the earthly realms connect.
Exactly.
Okay.
And one example, the Palace of Baal at Ugarit is described as having paved bricks, making it a house of the clearness of lapis lazuli.
Okay.
Now, what does Moses see under God's feet at Sinai?
It's a pavement of sapphire stone.
Exactly.
Whoa, okay, that parallel is striking.
It really is.
Like, it makes you think about how they envisioned these divine realms, but how does the Israelite version of the divine council differ from the Canaanite one? What sets it apart?
I think one of the biggest differences is how Yahweh takes on the roles of both El and Baal.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah,
He combines both.
he does.
That's fascinating.
It really is, and it was a brilliant theological move.
What's the significance?
It basically elevates Yahweh above the entire Canaanite pantheon.
Oh, wow.
So it solidifies his unique supremacy.
So it's like he's saying, I'm taking the best of both worlds and I'm transcending them.
Exactly.
That's a powerful statement about Yahweh's unique position.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm hooked. What else can you tell me about the structure of this divine council?
Well, there's this really interesting concept that starts to emerge in the Hebrew Bible within this three-tiered system. And it's this idea of a binitarian Godhead.
Binitarian Godhead. Okay, that sounds complicated. Break that down for me.
Well, it's kind of like a foreshadowing of more
Yeah.
complex theological ideas that will later develop in Christianity,
Okay.
where God is understood as both one and three.
Okay.
But we see hints of this in the Hebrew Bible with the angel of Yahweh.
Right, the angel of Yahweh. I remember coming across that term, but I never fully understood what it meant.
Right. Well, the angel of Yahweh is depicted as distinct from Yahweh,
Okay.
but also carrying his authority and his presence.
Okay.
It's almost like a second manifestation of Yahweh himself.
So are we saying that the angel of Yahweh is like a pre-incarnation of Jesus?
That's a really complex theological question that
Okay.
scholars have debated for centuries.
Yeah.
But what we can say for certain is that the angel of Yahweh embodies this dynamic of both unity and distinction within the Godhead.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. We went from ancient Canaanite gods to the early hints of Christian theology.
It's a wild ride, isn't it?
This is why I love these deep dives. You never know where they're going to lead us.
Absolutely. And it's amazing how these ancient ideas still have an impact today, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But we were talking about these sons of God
Uh-huh.
and how much freedom they have in the council.
Right.
And you were about to tell me about the adversary.
Yes, Satan.
Yeah.
A very interesting figure.
He's always kind of freaked me out.
Yeah, a bit unsettling.
But interesting. I mean, he's always in there kind of stirring the pot.
Yeah, challenging and questioning.
Like in Job.
Right, testing people.
Yeah, he's like daring God to let him inflict suffering.
Yeah, but even that, I think, reinforces this idea.
Yeah.
That there's this interplay between different figures.
Yeah, it's not just a bunch of divine beings agreeing with each other all the time.
No, not at all. Different perspective, different roles to play.
Yeah, so it's less like a harmonious choir and more like a lively debate.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that it makes it more dynamic.
Yeah.
But here's a question for you. If we're talking about all these different beings, good, bad, powerful, less powerful,
Mhm.
doesn't that contradict the idea of monotheism?
Well, that's where I think we need to remember that the Hebrew Bible really emphasizes Yahweh's supremacy. He's the one true God, the creator of everything.
Okay, but how can it be monotheism if there are all these other powerful beings? It seems like a contradiction.
Well, it all comes down to how we understand the term Elohim.
Okay.
You know, we often translate that as God, but it's actually a much broader term.
Right, because I've noticed that Elohim pops up in a bunch of different contexts.
Exactly. It's not always referring to Yahweh himself.
Okay,
So think of Elohim as more of a descriptor of their residence.
okay.
So it's not about their specific nature or role, but where they are.
So like where they live.
Kind of like saying someone lives downtown.
Okay.
It tells you where they are, but
Yeah.
not what they do or who they are.
So you could have Elohim who are good or evil, powerful, weak. It just depends on where they reside in this cosmic order.
Exactly.
So Elohim doesn't automatically mean divine in the way we understand it today.
Right. It
Uh.
simply tells us that these beings belong to this non-human realm.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. But if Elohim can refer to all sorts of beings, how do we know which ones are actually worthy of worship?
Well, that's where we see this emphasis on Yahweh's uniqueness.
Okay.
Those phrases like, no other gods before me, they're not denying the existence of other Elohim.
Oh.
They're emphasizing Yahweh's unique position as the source of all creation.
So it's not about saying there aren't other powerful beings,
Right.
but more about clarifying Yahweh's unique role.
It's about hierarchy, not absolute singularity.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the Bible acknowledges this diverse spiritual landscape, but it's very clear about putting Yahweh at the top.
Precisely.
This is fascinating. It's like we're peeling back layers and uncovering a whole different understanding of the Bible's view of the spiritual world.
Absolutely.
But speaking of Elohim, could humans ever be considered Elohim?
Well, there are a couple of passages that make you wonder,
Yeah.
particularly in Exodus 21 and 22.
Yeah, like I always get tripped up on those passages because it seems like it's blurring the lines between human and divine.
But when you look at those passages, and particularly Deuteronomy 32,
Okay.
it seems that those are using Elohim, metaphorically,
No.
to emphasize the authority of human judges.
Okay, so it's more about highlighting their role,
Exactly.
not saying that they are divine.
Right, representing God's justice.
Yeah, it's like a giant puzzle, and
Absolutely.
all the pieces fit together, but sometimes they fit in kind of unexpected ways.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so what about the prophets? Where do they fit into all of this?
That's a great question.
Because they seem to have like this direct line to God. So I'm guessing they must play a role in the divine council.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, think about Isaiah
Okay.
and Ezekiel,
Uh-huh.
like literally transported to the divine throne room,
Right, like right in the thick of it.
right in the middle of the council.
It's like they get to see the control center of the cosmos.
Exactly. And those descriptions are
Yeah.
really rooted in this ancient Israelite understanding of the divine council.
No wonder their prophecies are so powerful.
And they weren't the only ones who had these kinds of interactions.
All right.
You know, think about Enoch,
Okay.
Noah.
Uh-huh.
These figures have encounters with the divine council
Okay.
that really shape their understanding of God and their purpose.
So the prophets and these other figures, they're not just passively receiving messages, they're actively engaged.
Right.
It's a dialogue.
Exactly. The back and forth. And I
Okay.
think that's why their writings are so compelling,
Yeah.
because they offer us this glimpse into the divine-human interaction.
Yeah, totally. It's like we're seeing these two realms collide.
Exactly.
Okay, this is amazing. We've gone from ancient Canaanite gods to the Hebrew Bible's view of monotheism and this whole structure of the divine council.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
Mhm.
But there's one big piece of the puzzle we haven't talked about yet.
And what's that?
Jesus.
I
So how does the divine council connect to the New Testament and Jesus?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, because the Old Testament's divine council actually lays the groundwork for understanding New Testament Christology and the concept of Jesus as the second Yahweh.
Second Yahweh. Okay, that's a new one. Explain that one.
So during the Second Temple period,
Uh-huh.
there were different Jewish interpretations of a second power in heaven.
Okay.
You know, some people thought it was Adam
Right.
or Enoch or Moses even.
So the idea of a second divine figure alongside Yahweh wasn't unheard of.
Not at all.
Okay.
And for Christians, Jesus fulfills this role perfectly.
Okay.
He embodies the descriptions and roles that were attributed to this second power.
Interesting.
He is the Word,
Okay.
the cloud rider, the embodiment of wisdom, even the angel of Yahweh.
Whoa. Okay, so you're saying that these ideas were already there and Jesus just comes along and embodies them fully.
Exactly.
Wow, okay. But how does this connect to the divine council?
Well, if you remember how we talked about the angel of Yahweh
Yes.
carrying Yahweh's presence and authority,
Yeah.
well, Jesus is described in very similar terms.
Okay.
So he's not just a prophet or a messenger.
Right.
He embodies God's presence.
So it's like he's stepping into that role,
Yeah.
but he's taking it to a whole new level.
Precisely.
He's not just a member of the council. He is the ultimate expression of God's power.
Exactly. And that's where the concept of the divine council really helps us
Right.
to appreciate how radical Jesus's claims were.
No. Yeah.
Because he wasn't just saying he was a prophet.
Right.
He was saying that he was one with God.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the whole only begotten son thing?
Right.
Doesn't that contradict the idea of other sons of God?
That's where it's important to understand the nuances of
Yeah.
the original Greek word monogenes.
Okay.
You know, it's often translated as only begotten,
Right.
but it doesn't necessarily mean a chronological birth order.
Okay.
It really means unique,
Okay.
one of a kind.
So a special relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
An unparalleled relationship.
So it's not about Jesus literally being the only son,
No.
but more about his unique status.
It's exactly his closeness to God.
But Yahweh is unique, even though there are other Elohim.
So it's a parallel.
Yes.
Yahweh's the unique God, and Jesus is the unique Son.
Exactly. They both hold this singular position within the divine hierarchy.
Wow. This is really helping me see the Old and New Testaments in a whole new way.
Yeah, it's like a bridge
Yeah.
connecting those two worlds.
And speaking of bridges,
Uh-huh.
what about that passage in John 10
Oh, yes.
where Jesus quotes Psalm 82?
Right, when he's debating with the Jewish leaders.
Yeah, they're like ready to stone him.
Right, for blasphemy.
Yeah, he's messing with their understanding of God.
Exactly.
And then he quotes Psalm 82.
Right, he says, I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you.
Yeah, but I always thought he was using that to kind of downplay his claim.
It's a common interpretation.
Yeah, like, hey, chill out. Humans can be called gods.
But remember the context of Psalm 82.
Okay.
It's not about humans being called God.
That's right.
It's talking about the divine counsel.
The Elohim.
Exactly. So when Jesus quotes this psalm, he's actually doubling down.
Right.
He's not backing down.
It's a powerful move.
Yeah, he's saying, look, even your own scriptures say there are other divine beings.
Exactly.
So why are you freaking out?
He's challenging their limited understanding of God and the divine realm.
He's like, you guys are thinking way too small.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to get it.
Good.
But he doesn't stop there, does he?
No, he goes on to say that the Father is in him
Right.
and he is in the Father.
And that sounds familiar.
It should.
It echoes the angel of Yahweh.
Exactly.
So he's not just claiming to be divine. He's saying he embodies God.
Precisely.
This conversation is blowing my mind.
It's a lot, isn't it?
We've uncovered so much, but I feel like we're just getting started.
We've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, there's still so much more to explore.
Absolutely.
Okay, so how does understanding the divine counsel affect our interpretation of the Bible?
Well, think about those stories where God seems to change his mind
Okay.
or wrestle with decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of seeing that as some kind of internal conflict within God,
Yeah.
maybe we can understand that as a deliberation between the council.
Okay.
Different perspectives.
So it's more about a divine process
Exactly.
and not about God being fickle.
Right.
Okay.
And then you have those prophetic visions of heaven, those
Yeah.
divine throne rooms.
Yeah.
We can see that those are rooted in the Israelite understanding of the divine counsel.
So it's not just symbolic, it's their actual understanding of how things work.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But what about prayer?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, if we're not just communicating with God, but also maybe with the council,
Right.
what does that mean for prayer?
I mean, it opens up new possibilities
Yeah.
for intercession, for spiritual warfare.
Wow. That's a big idea.
It is.
It's like we're expanding how we think about the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
It's not just me and God one-on-one.
You're part of a larger conversation.
Yeah, and we can maybe even tap into those spiritual forces through prayer.
Exactly.
Okay, this is incredible.
It is.
We've gone from ancient Canaanite gods to the Hebrew Bible to the New Testament and Jesus
And prayer.
and prayer. It's a lot.
Yeah. It's amazing how much we've uncovered.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
We really have.
And there's so much more to explore.
Absolutely. The divine counsel is a concept that can really transform how we understand the Bible.
I completely agree. But before we wrap up,
Uh-huh.
I have one final question for you.
Okay, shoot.
Given everything we've learned today,
Uh-huh.
how do you think this knowledge challenges or affirms your own beliefs about God and the spiritual world and your place in it?
Yeah, that is a big question.
It really is. Like, how do we fit into all of this?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started looking into this, I have to admit, I was a little hesitant
Yeah.
because I thought, isn't this just a bunch of, like, ancient mythology?
Right.
How could this possibly be relevant to my life?
Yeah.
But the more we talk about it,
The more I'm realizing just how profound these ideas really are.
I think that's what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
Is that we start with something seemingly simple,
Yeah.
and then it just takes us down these paths.
Total.
And you discover all these layers of meaning you never even knew existed.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Right.
But instead of crying, we're like, oh my gosh.
Exactly. There's so much here.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the key takeaways you hope our listeners will walk away with?
Well, I think the first thing is
Yeah.
that I hope they'll come away with this renewed appreciation for the Bible.
Okay.
You know, it's not this simple, straightforward text.
Right?
It's this tapestry
Yeah.
woven together from different strands of history and culture, theology. And I think the divine counsel is one of those threads that helps us to see the whole picture.
It's like we've been given this new set of lenses to see the Bible through.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden these passages are coming into focus. And we're seeing connections we might have missed before.
Absolutely. And I also hope that people will come away with a better understanding of God.
Okay.
You know, because this idea of the divine council challenges that traditional view
Okay.
of God as this solitary, all-powerful being who just operates in isolation.
Uh-huh.
And it gives us this vision of God who's relational,
Okay.
who collaborates, who delegates authority,
Okay.
who even allows for like debate and dissent.
This is not the God I grew up with.
It's a much more dynamic picture, isn't it?
It is way more interesting, too.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've got this new view of the Bible.
Uh-huh.
We've got this new understanding of God.
Right.
What else?
Well, I also hope people will come away with a sense of empowerment.
Okay.
Because the divine council reminds us that we're not alone.
Okay.
You know, we're part of this huge cosmic drama.
Yeah.
And we're surrounded by this cloud of witnesses
Uh-huh.
who are cheering us on, challenging us, working with us.
To accomplish God's plan. It's
Right.
there. It's kind of exciting and terrifying at the same time.
It's a little bit of both, isn't it?
It is. But before we go, I have to ask you for one final thought-provoking question.
Oh, I love it. Hit me.
What's that one question that's going to keep our listeners up at night?
Okay, well, if we accept this idea that the divine council is real, not just this ancient myth,
Okay.
how does that change our understanding of spiritual warfare,
Okay.
intercession, our own role in bringing about God's kingdom?
Whoa. Okay. That is a powerful question.
It is a call to action.
Yeah.
To think about how we engage with the spiritual realm.
So it's not just an abstract concept.
Right.
It affects how we live,
Absolutely.
how we pray, how we
Yeah.
interact with the spiritual forces all around us.
Exactly. And that's what I think makes this so fascinating.
So we've only scratched the surface,
We have.
and there's so much more to learn.
There is.
So to our listeners, keep diving deeper.
Keep asking those questions.
Yeah. Let us know what you discover.
Absolutely.
And maybe your questions will inspire a future deep dive.
That would be great.
All right. Until next time, happy digging.